Daredevil Born Again has already been written, filmed, edited, rewritten, and filmed again. So I understand that nothing said here will change what was decided on months ago, let alone the fact that no one with any kind of sway at Marvel is even remotely watching this. Yet I can't help but lay out my wish list for what I want to see in Disney Plus's Daredevil Born Again, and even what I think will happen. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, your naive but informed optimist, and I probably did way too much research for this video, considering all that was probably necessary to read was Frank Miller and Charles Soule's iconic runs. But in the past few months, I read every Daredevil comic I could get my hands on, the only one that I haven't finished being Ahmed's current run, and that's only because it hasn't finished. So right now, I feel like I might be the most qualified armchair expert on Daredevil. Therefore, from looking at the many comic elements that can and should be adapted, to hints and teases laid out in the most recent trailer, let's break down exactly what should be expected from the Disney Plus series Daredevil Born Again. And naturally, the best case scenario for this show is a mixture of adapting the source material directly and translating or recontextualizing it to this specific iteration of Daredevil. And unless the filmmakers create something wholly new and original, which is a possibility, I can point to a few different isolated comics or comic runs that most likely will be drawn from. But I suppose the best place to start is with the actual Born Again story, which I doubt is going to inspire that much in the show aside from Matt's downfall into madness, something that happens in pretty much every Daredevil run anyway. But the biggest reason why I don't think this specific run is going to be drawn from, at least aside from the name, is because it already kinda was with Season 3 in the Netflix days. But in that Born Again comic, Fisk learns Daredevil's identity through a lot of steps, and it goes through a lot of different hands before him. But essentially, it's Karen that reveals it. None of that pertains to the upcoming TV show because Kingpin already knows Matt's identity in this continuity, but what I'm confident will be used by Disney is Fisk manipulating every facet of Matt's life and turning it on his head. Things like freezing his assets, pitting the IRS against him, and making all of his bills marked unpaid no matter what he does, and disbarring him for allegedly paying witnesses. And it's said that Foggy keeps Matt out of prison, but it's never shown how that happens, which makes one thing I know I'd like to see being an extended sequence or even an entire episode dedicated to that trial. But to go back to the Born Again comic just for another second, I want to highlight how Fisk is defeated, because the only reason why he loses is his temper gets the better of him and he decides to very publicly send a ruthless maniac after Daredevil. Now, I sincerely doubt that exact situation will happen, especially since that gunman, Nuke, has already come and gone in Jessica Jones Season 1. But I wouldn't mind seeing Fisk's downfall happen because he chose to do something publicly destructive like this. I could also see something similar to the Bendis run that only sorta has anything to do with Fisk himself, but depicts Matt becoming his own Kingpin of New York to control crime from the inside. But I know that won't be adapted simply because it would be too dark for Disney. And I bring up Bendis' run because it's so influential, and Born Again because the show's title is taken directly from Miller's run, but the actual stories I think this will take most inspiration from is Charles Soule's Back in Black run, specifically Volume 3, Dark Art, and Volume 6, Mayor Fisk. There are even a few different plot lines or shots from those two that I think will be adapted almost one for one, only because it would be a missed opportunity not to. But let's dive into the Dark Art story first, which features the introduction of Muse, an artistic Daredevil villain that I'm surprised hasn't caught on more, but I'm incredibly glad he's getting his due, though I am doubtful he'll be too major of a player. It has been stated that the show will be mature, and my first thought when seeing that was the opportunity to adapt some of Muse's more sadistic art shows, whether that be the mural made from 100 different people's blood that had the public calling him Van Gore, corpses of physically bizarre looking Inhumans displayed for spectators, or the room of hundreds of bodies hanging upside down from the ceiling, being drained of blood for painting. And at first glance, I'd assume that Disney wouldn't go for any of that, but the more time that goes on, the more I think about the possibilities. Just imagine that second example, a room full of dead Inhumans displayed for a freaky art piece, but instead of Inhumans, they could be mutants. Set up that they exist in the MCU now and are somewhat commonplace after seeing one here and there for years. Unless there's going to be an incursion or something like that to explain how the mutants are introduced all at once, just putting them in and telling the audience to get up to speed is the best way to implement them. And without giving too much away about Muse, because I don't want to ruin his character for you, he might also be an Inhuman, I think. At the very least, his story originally involves Inhuman stuff, with Matt even going to talk to the Inhuman Queen, Medusa, in Atalan during that arc and pairing up with their government liaison multiple times, which is all cool, but can easily be changed to just mutant stuff. And of course, the more Muse is in the show, the better, because I love everything about the sick and twisted artwork he puts up, in concept and fictionally, because it's actually terrible, but I can't see his whole storyline slotting in that smoothly with everything else. Maybe Muse could work as a distraction that Fisk attempts to utilize, but soon enough realizes that trying to use a force of chaos to his own benefit can bite him in the butt. Except he already learned that same lesson in Season 3, with Bullseye. And to quickly talk about Bullseye, since I brought him up, I just hope he's in it for more than just one fight. He won't be a main character, even less so than Muse, but in any case, that one fight between Daredevil and Bullseye that we've seen glimpses of better be incredible. And since I'm kind of on the subject, another thing I'm eagerly anticipating, quite possibly more so than anything else, is a mind-blowing one-take fight scene. And Charlie Cox has already let slip that there is another one for Born Again. I mean, there kinda had to be. It's part of this Daredevil's identity just as much as tight alleyways and hallways are. So my only question for that is, how long is it gonna be? Do you think it's even possible to top the almost 11-minute stitched together oneer from Season 3? Not like that's going to make or break the action though. I mean, did you see how brutal it looked in the trailer? Sending a flying knee to obliterate a man's leg, snapping arms, and hitting a man into next week, all with precise frames dropped out just to sell how vicious this show could potentially be. But moving away from the action and getting back to the comics, because I would like to see Kingpin's rise to becoming a corrupt politician. But judging from the trailer, it seems like we'll start with him already being mayor. Besides, we already kinda got that in the Penguin, and Kingpin's rise to mayor is expanded upon in other comics, such as Kingpin's own series, but for Daredevil, he just leaves town for a bit and comes back to Fisk being mayor, so this seemingly can work. And then, entirely separate from Fisk's rise to political power, is the Mayor Fisk comic arc that is, I hope to God, being pulled from. But as much as I want to see this specific story, it can't be adapted too much, because in that, Muse breaks out of an Inhuman secure prison and makes building-sized murals with different street-level superheroes. And at first, Kingpin attempts to use this situation to his advantage, where he blames the killing of cops on the Punisher to garner more support against costumed guys. And that kinda works, gaining him enough control and power that it becomes a problem for all of the street-level heroes, forcing them to team up and deal with Mayor Fisk and his many henchmen. And I would love to see that, but most likely, if anything, it'll be saved for Season 2. But either way, I wouldn't mind the excuse to involve every street-level character that could be crammed in. Also involved in that are plenty of extra elements such as Mike, Blindspot, The Hand, The Beast, and Matt's priest being revealed to be part of some light organization opposite The Hand and has superpowers. And frankly, lose all that. Especially The Hand. I know as a Daredevil fan this is a little sacrilegious to say, but I've never liked them. Whether supernatural or just skilled ninjas, they're still infinitely less interesting than a small-time criminal forced into their terrible life just to make ends meet. So let's just say I'd rather see Stiltman than The Hand any day. I also wouldn't want The Hand in this specific story because they are essentially used as a plot device to give everyone a get-out-of-jail-free card when they invade New York. I want to see the emotional consequences of everyone's decisions, not a lazy cop-out. And much less importantly, another story that could be drawn from is the Death of Daredevil run that follows the Mayor Fisk arc. And that story involves even more moving pieces that I won't even begin to explain, but what I want to be adapted from that run is the case against Kingpin, where a bunch of superheroes testify against him in a massive hearing. And they're able to do so because of Daredevil going through a court case against a small-time criminal, Simon Slagansky, where he was able to secure legal precedent for masked superheroes to testify against criminals. And I want to see a lot of this court case and story because it's fun, but also because it dives into how Fisk was elected, how the Mad Thinker hacked into the election and subtly fixes it for Fisk to win, which I could see being the case, or just as likely as another time Fisk became mayor by literally mind-controlling the city in an imperceptible way, and he does so by exploiting the Purple Man's power. And I guess I wouldn't mind seeing that, with that tying in with the past Netflix villains. But if I'm honest, I'd rather see a show dive into Fisk legitimately winning the election. For the general audience, it puts him on a similar level to Lex Luthor, who is a vain and malicious murderer, yet is still able to put on a facade good enough to become the president. It's also revealed in the Death of Daredevil run that Fisk would have won fair and square, but he screwed himself by undermining the democratic process. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Kingpin rig the mayoral election just to have that moment where he realizes that his corrupt brain got in the way of his true success. And transitioning away from the comics to the trailer in particular, because before I conclude, I'd like to quickly discuss how I think this show could start, as well as a couple more elements I do or don't want to see, because I was optimistic that we'd start with Matt just being Daredevil and no dinking around with him quitting and needing to reignite the spark inside him, but it does seem like that'll be the case, which I'll still have a hard time accepting just because I'd prefer to have the show start strong. However, having that cool stuff be built up to isn't the worst thing in the world. And judging from the trailer, it seems like Matt might have retired because of the trial of the century, a famous Daredevil case where he tries to get White Tiger free from wrongfully being accused of murder, something that, if he's retired because of, means it probably didn't go that well. He could also be retiring from accidentally killing a guy, the main plot point kicking off Zdarsky's amazing run, which I don't really want to see, but I can't deny how potentially good that could be to adapt. And unrelated to everything, one last thing that needs to be shouted from the rooftops is just how much I don't want to see Mike, someone who doesn't actually exist and is a fiction created by Matt to put people off of the trail of him obviously being Daredevil, except he is brought to life by the reader, a guy who turns anything he reads into reality. And just, nah, none of that. But what are your hopes for Daredevil Born Again? Do you want it all to lead up to some kind of massive Devil's Reign-esque crossover? Drop a comment and let me know. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.